champion, first of all, let's see what a champion really is. You know, when you look at Webster's definition, a champion is a competitor who excels all others. Somebody who beats everybody else, somebody who always wins. But that's not what a champion really is. That's the result of being a champion. See, what makes a champion is all the work they have to put in to get to that point where they can actually beat these other people or where they can win the race. So, as I begin to search this out and begin to really take a look at the lives of people you would classify as champions, the one thing that stood out, and you can look at anybody you want to, whether they're successful in business or whether they're successful in athletics, and the one thing that they do that sets them apart from everybody else is they overcome themselves. See, all of us have the potential to become champions, but we have to overcome ourselves. We're our own worst enemy when it comes to being a champion. When it comes to being a winner, we're the person that holds ourselves back the most. And in the book, Finishing Strong by Steve Farrar, he uses a quote from Charles Spurgeon. And that quote says, "Beware of no man more than yourself." We carry our own worst enemies within us. If you want to know what's keeping you from being a champion, what's keeping you from reaching your full God-given potential, it's right here. For me, it was my attitude. Because the thing I focused on the most was what I couldn't do. I compared myself to everybody else because I wanted to be just like them. I wanted to be, quote, normal. And as I began to grow and mature, I realized that most of the people who classify themselves as normal, they're really messed up. Now, I don't want to be nothing like those people because they're the ones that are really screwed up and just don't know it. So, when I talk about overcoming yourself, you know, what are some of the things we have to overcome? You know, it doesn't matter if you have a physical disability or not. There's something in your life that you have to overcome. And I want to give you just a few things. This is not by any means an exhaustive list of things you're going to have to overcome. You know, the first thing that we have to overcome is our own fear. And, you know, the Bible gives us a great example of fear and what it can do to you. You know, Kevin talked about the Israelites and their move into the Promised Land and all the things they've seen the Lord do for them. But when you look at Numbers chapter 13 and 14, you get to see the fear. The Lord tells them to go and take the Promised Land. You know, He doesn't ask anything of them. He says, go and take it. That's all they have to do. They don't have to be, you know, they don't have to be a certain type of person. They don't have to look a certain way. He just says, go and take it. But do they do that? No, they form a committee to go check it out. You know, they get together and they go, okay, let's go over here and take a look at this and see if we can actually do it. So they get 10 people, and those 10 people go in and they look at it, and it's everything the Lord says it is. You know, it's a land flowing with milk and honey. It's everything they want, everything they've prayed for. So they automatically go back and go, we can take it, right? Now they all go back, and the one thing they noticed was the giants. So they all said, we can't do this. You know, it don't matter what God says, we know we can't do it. So they didn't do it. There were only 2 men out of that group of 10 that actually got to see the Promised Land. And the reason that they got to see the Promised Land is because they were the only 2 that believed that they could actually do what God had called them to do. So if you're not willing to overcome your fear, you'll never be what God wants you to be. Because that's part of growing. He challenges you to overcome things. And one of those things is fear. If you're not willing to overcome fear in your life, you may miss your Promised Land. So the first thing that you're going to have to overcome is fear. And the second thing that you'll have to overcome sometimes are the labels and opinions of other people. You know, in truth, it doesn't matter what everybody else says about you. But for some reason, we take their opinions to heart so much that it keeps us from being what the Lord's called us to be. You know, there was one man that didn't do that. And John Maxwell, in his book, Running with the Giants, gives us an interesting view of the life of David. And when you think of David, we all think of some great warrior. You know, that's what he was. He was a man's man. He was a super warrior. But if it had been left up to everybody else, David would have been nothing more than, he would have done nothing more than take care of the sheep. Samuel goes to crown the next king, goes to anoint the next king. And they have this big shindig at Jesse's house and invite everybody but David. David's the one Samuel's going after, but he's looking at everything else. So the one man that really has king potential, nobody else believes it, so they don't even invite him to the party. And then we can take another look at the life of David when he goes off and he fights Goliath. All those people, they were all right behind him. And the Israelite army was way behind him. And Saul was the number one guy that was way back there. He was supposed to be out fighting the giant, but he was sitting back at the house because he was too afraid. So David goes in and he says, look, I can take this guy. This guy ain't nothing because God's on my side. And Saul's like, hey, you're crazy. You can't fight this guy because he's a giant and he's been a warrior from his youth. And you're only in youth. There's no way you can kill this giant. So, if David had believed that, he never would have fought Goliath in the first place. And then, we all know what happened when he goes out to fight Goliath. Goliath, he just cowers down and runs the other way, right? Now, he makes fun of David. He compares it to a little dog. And he says, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to feed you to the dogs. Well, the thing about it is, David got the last laugh. In every situation, David got the last laugh because he was willing to believe what God said and not what others said. So the first two things you may have to overcome are your fears and the labels and opinions of others. But, some of us are going to have to overcome physical or mental limitations. Growing up with a disability, there was a lot of things I had to overcome, a lot of things I had to do to push myself. A lot of people aren't going to have to overcome the same things I have to overcome. But I can just about guarantee you that if I set 500 pounds up here on the podium and ask you to come up here and move it, there ain't any of you in here that can come up here and move it off the stage without help. We all have physical limitations. But I thought for years that I was the only one. So when it comes to overcoming yourself, sometimes you're going to have to overcome those physical limitations. And one man that really stands out in my mind when you talk about overcoming physical limitations is a man that most of you probably never heard of. A man by the name of Glenn Cunningham. This man set the world record in the mile in 1934. And in 1936, he won an Olympic gold medal in the Berlin Olympics for running the mile. But that's not the most important part of his story. Yeah, you can look at him and say, well, he was an Olympic athlete. Of course he was a champion. But see, when he was 7 years old, he was burned so severely in a schoolhouse fire that not only did the doctors tell him he'd never walk again, they even considered amputating his legs. So yeah, he had to overcome physical limitations to become the champion that he was. It took this guy at least an hour or more before he could even run at all. But that's not even the most amazing part of his story. The most amazing part is after he quit running, he opened a home for underprivileged children, and in his life he raised approximately 10,000 underprivileged kids. This guy was a champion, all right. He was a champion athlete, but he was also a champion in life. Those 10,000 kids don't remember him for running a mile. They don't remember him for setting a record. They remember him for the impact and the sacrifice he was willing to make to take care of them. So, those are just a few of the things that we have to overcome. And another thing that we're all going to have to overcome, and none of us get away from, is failure. Failure hits us from every corner. It's hit me I don't know how many times, and it's out there waiting to hit me again. Just whenever I'm ready to make a move for the Lord, He's going to put the hammer down, and the devil's going to go, you're a failure, you can't do this. There's no way. One of the greatest stories of failure is Peter. Not only did Peter the same thing. The Lord's like, this is what you're going to do. No, I don't. I don't believe you. That's what Peter said. He said, I'm not ever going to do that. You're wrong. And so Jesus said, he's like, all right, whatever you say. And he's like, I know. Because I know everything, so I know what I'm talking about. So we think that's the end of the story for Peter, right? No. See, when Jesus rose from the grave, he went back and restored Peter. And Peter gained victory because the Lord continued to use him. He was instrumental in establishing the early church. See, the thing that Peter learned and the thing that you have to learn about failure is simply a building block for success. The thing about failure is, if you never fail, you're never going to succeed. Because if you're not failing, that pretty much means you're not trying. And if you're not trying, you're never going to